folks, we're live. Welcome, everybody, to the show. I have with me Mr. Dan Pancaldi.
How are you, Artie?
Land of Canada. Yes, I am fine.
Yes, I was gardening today, talking about Canada.
Yes. So I've been doing gardening too. Actually, we're not going to clutter the show with that. I'm growing like tomatoes and herbs and stuff like that. I think I have some hot peppers going too. So.
Look at that. Stigler's here. Wasn't he banned?
Shit, no, I don't know. Definitely not. Didn't ban Stigler. I had to actually ban somebody on Monday night, but we're not going to talk about that either.
Did you ban David Thompson?
I did not ban David Thompson. No, David is too agreeable. He could almost be Canadian. He's so nice. So
yeah, he could.
So, and he's a Canadian spy living in Ohio. Actually,
but I don't think he's
infiltrated the United States.
I don't think he's sorry enough.
That's what gave him away. So anyway, we're talking about Chit-pull. If we might have had a different topic that we talked about last week, but we're going to talk about Chit-pull this week because that's what I randomly came up with 10 minutes before the show. So Chit-pull games are very popular now, and Dan and I were talking about this before the show, and I'm more than willing to be corrected on this. But as far as I could tell, the way we currently understand the Chit-pull mechanism, it seems to date from the game Panzer Command, which is a Victory Games title from 1983 or 1984, designed by Eric Lee Smith. There are other games like the Victory in the West series where you are drawing, and a bunch of other SPI stuff actually, where you're drawing chits to do various things, but the chits don't pace the game, which they do in Panzer Command. And of course, the mechanism from Panzer Command was adopted more or less wholesale into the Grand Tactical series from Multiman. So if anybody's familiar with that, it's not exactly the same. I've looked at Panzer Command, but it's very, very similar.
It's funny, Artie? I don't know when you said the Chit-pull Multiman. Is Chit-pull is it shunned? Is is there snobbery to Chit-pull? Is that a mechanism that's...
We've already got people in the chat talking about how they don't really like Chit-pull. So, which is fine. I mean, it's just if you don't prefer that mechanism. I mean, Chit-pull is really just an alternative to I go, you go, although it isn't always. Sometimes you have two different pools, and you draw, and then the other person draws. So I want to say that I can be misremembering this, but I want to say that the Dark Valley is like that, where you actually do have two different pools and you alternate pulling out of them. So it is an I go, you go, but exactly what you get to activate is determined by whichever chit that you drew.
Okay. But what about like for what?
Look at this. Look at this.
Oh no.
Look at this.
I lost my train of thought.
He ruined it for him.
Yeah, I swear to God, I don't remember what I was saying.
So I don't know. We're going to do an hour and a half tonight. We are on a fairly tight time schedule on Wednesday nights, which we have managed to stick to within about 5 or 10 minutes, maybe anyway. Actually, Stalin's War, is that a Chit-pull game? It might be.
The little pocket game?
No, I'm talking about, there's a GMT game called Stalin's War. There's a guy, I've seen the metagaming, Stalin's Tanks, I think is what
okay, sorry, yeah.
So it's funny. Let's see.
Well, Artie, what about Chit-pull for initiative? Like you have a common cup, and you throw all your chits that have to be activated in a common pool, and that'll give you Fog of War, man.
Yeah, it is a Fog of War enhancing mechanism. I don't think it necessarily gives you a ton of Fog of War per se, but it adds unpredictability, which is the effect that Fog of War is producing in the first place. So I think the mechanic that we usually mean when we say Chit-pull, that is exactly how it is used. There's a pool of chits, and it is the mechanism for determining initiative.
So, Jesus, what'd you say? You said,
and it's a good way to avoid the strict I go, you go thing. Now, I mean, for certain types of games that you couldn't adapt, say, Fire in the East to be the Chit-pull game, because it'd be like, oh, other guy went twice in a row. I'm going home. I'll see you guys next week.
Oh.
I mean, so because it takes so long. So typically the mechanic, like in GTS, right? You know, it might take. It shouldn't take more than like half an hour to do one activation. Like you draw the 82nd Airborne, you do their stuff. That shouldn't take more than half an hour, unless a player is super duper slow, which we have seen. But
I think Chit-pull resolves a lot of problems easily and effectively.
Well, it's a super easy and intuitive mechanic. You draw a chit, that's what it says on the chit is what happens, right?
And there you go.
And you can simulate a lot of interesting things with that mechanism that's not just initiative. So, for example, I don't know why my dog's barking. For example, the old so CSS, right? The company scale system, which is another Starkweather design, which is very similar Chit-pull mechanism to GTS. I'll use that as an example because it's fresher in my mind. Has like a wind chit. And when you do artillery barrages, you like put these barrage markers down, which block line of sight, and put penalties on the firing through those hexes or units in those hexes that just got barraged because they're all undercover. The wind chit is the random mechanism by which all that barrage stuff goes away. So there's also there's another special chit in there too. There's like a chit for the naval stuff. So like you draw the naval chit, all the naval stuff happens. So you could do interesting pacing things. You could put random events perhaps in, and in fact, there is a random event mechanism that happens in GTS. That is, if you roll a 9 on certain rolls, which is like the worst possible roll on a D10 in that system, you then go to the random event cup and draw a chit to determine which random event happens, which is off a list of, depending on the scenario you're playing, it could be 2 or 3 different ones, or it could be
and do you
15.
Do you like that mechanic?
I like it in GTS a lot. Yeah, I think it works great in GTS. I have no compunctions on Chit-pull at all. Now, I mean, if at its most reductive, where it's just, where it's basically I go, you go instead, but instead of that, you put 4 German chits in the cup and 4 Soviet chits in the cup, then I don't see what you're not adding as much. But then you can look at something like the Dark Valley, where every turn, that exact mix of chits for both the Germans and the Soviets changes as the game goes on. So it doesn't change every turn, but it changes. Alexander was talking about. I assume this to be Alexander. Was mentioned this before. The changing Soviet doctrine. I played the Soviets, so I'm more familiar with that. The changing Soviet doctrine over the course of the 4 years of the war is modeled by the changes in their chit pool, and that's really cool. And there's order of battle changes as well, but that's actually really cool.
Yeah, that makes sense there. It can't be Alexander, because Alexander doesn't make sense, so it's got to be Grant.
It could be. It doesn't, not fashion sense anyway. So, S. Craig Taylor went on to create Close Assault. So S. Craig Taylor, the late S. Craig Taylor, was the designer of one of my favorites, Flat Top, which is not a Chit-pull game, and also of Wooden Ships and Iron Men, for that matter. Close Assault by Yaquinto, I don't really remember, but Firepower from Avalon Hill, while I didn't play it, I do remember it. So
no, I don't know, man. If you want to throw,
I saw this too, and I don't know to what extent that's true. That's why I'm kind of narrowing it down to the specific initiative Chit-pull mechanic that I think we mean when we're talking about that in a war games context. There are other games that are for Panzer Command, like Operation Grenade, which I think is one of the ones that's listed there as a Chit-pull game, and I've got that. That's not the same mechanism. That's the variable strength chits. It's a Victory in the West system. So most of the combat units have an unspecified or unknown strength before, and you don't know what the strength is. You don't know. The other person doesn't know until they're engaged. And at that point, you draw a strength chit and you keep it under the unit chit for the rest of the game. That's not at all the same mechanic, even though you are technically drawing chits out of a cup.
You know what? And Toyle, Stigler was saying, I was going to ask you about Stigler.
Mm-hmm.
Single-handedly revolutionized this series. Who else? All I know is Herman Lutman using that.
Okay, so and I could talk about Herman's Chit-pull system too, which I would want to be specific. What I'd be talking about the Blind Swords version, because I haven't looked closely enough at the new Most Fearful Sacrifice version. So for those who don't know, legendary wargame artist Rick Barber passed away at some point last week, we think. So it's looking like a Most Fearful Sacrifice will end up being his career coda. It is a wonderful looking map.
Oh my God! So, what a way! I never thought about it that way. And if you think about it, what a way! What a way to do it.
I suppose so. Yeah. I mean, Mark Herman said on Twitter, he's like, I just got maps from Rick like 3 days ago. What happened? So for Rebel Fury, Rick was doing the maps for his game Rebel Fury that's coming out from GMT at some point. And you can't replace absolutely unique art style. You cannot replace that art style. So I don't know what they were going to do for a second volume in that series. But the system that Stigler is talking about is the Great Battles of the American Civil War, which the old version of which from SPI was pretty much a standard. I go, you go. I'm going to lunch. I'll see you guys when it's closer to our turn type of situation. At some point, approximately when the series went over to GMT, Richard Berg changed it kind of completely to be a Chit-pull system. And the way it works is there's like a rating for each formation. What the formation is depends on the scenario and the game and all that. And then there'll be sub-formations, which each have chits. And the rating for the formation determines how many of the chits go in the pool. And then there's a randomizer that determines like the overall, I think, division. I mean, in the context of Gettysburg, you'd be drawing for like Confederate corps or Union Confederate divisions or Union corps. So each of them will draw like an action rating chit. That's not what it's called. I forget what it's
you're
called.
Talking MMP, right?
No, this is GMT. This is the GMT big Civil War series with Death Valley and 3 Days of Gettysburg and Twin Peaks and the upcoming Into the Woods. And it's actually so you end up with a lot of chits in a big battle like Gettysburg. You end up with a lot of chits in that pool. I mean, sometimes we would not, in our like 4-hour game session, we would not get through an entire turn in a night. But each individual like pulse where you draw a chit, okay, I'm going to activate Reynolds division or corps, I guess, and you would do that, and it wouldn't take that long. It might take 20 minutes, but you might have 30 or 40 chits in the cup for the whole turn too. So that's another similar mechanism where the composition of the pool shifts as the game goes on. So for what remains is a great Chit-pull system. Now let me talk about. I haven't played for what remains, so I apologize to David in advance for not being able to talk about that. But the Herman Lutman Chit-pull system is basically a formation-based chit. So there's a pool of chits you draw, and in that mix there are events, which may be like Union events or Confederate events, and then there are formations. And then when you draw a formations chit, you roll to see whether the formation gets a full activation, a partial activation, or gets boned.
Okay, so there's no event phase. The events happen when they happen as you pull a chit or something.
So this is the change in A Most Fearful Sacrifice. So you activate the chits at certain times, like the event chits,
right?
But it's a lot more like a hand of cards that you hold and then play at the right time. So you end up with like a hand of these chits, and I think it'll be a lot better with cards, right? It's just it's a more natural mechanic for cards than it is for chits. That's how the events work in there. So you will usually choose to hold the chits rather than play them immediately.
Now, has Herman modified something or solidified something, made something easier by doing this?
Well, just putting them on cards, I think makes it easier, because so you would say, I have the Rebel chit, Rebel Yell. Well, what does that do? I don't know. I got to look it up every time we use it. On a card, you can put the entire event on with all the rules on the card. So it will be easier and will expedite play to have it on cards than it is. But it's exactly the same mechanic. The unusual thing of that is that's the blind swords Chit-pull variant is that you can like accumulate those events and have them as a hand to play when you want to. And that's a major function, major thing about making the game work successfully.
That's pretty cool, though. And that was Herman's idea.
I'm unaware that anybody came up with that particular wrinkle before Herman.
Because I really like that, to have more information on a card as a chit. Like when you're pulling a chit, you pull a card.
Matt's trying to be provocative here, I think, but it's exactly in this case it's the mechanism. There's some details that are different, but the mechanism is exactly the same. You just have this physically a card instead of a chit. It's exactly the same thing, which makes me wonder if anybody else has done that exact thing where they have basically the same mechanism, except that your initiative is coming off of cards rather than chits, which is a very imprecise way to put it, actually.
Well,
I think.
I don't know about initiative, but I know the John Butterfield's RAF. You start off with 2 cards, and they're open, and I mean they're face up. And to know if there's an air raid or something, I guess it's like a chit pull. You got to pull up the other card, and that gives you a general idea of what's going to happen. So I guess
Actually, so I've never played RAF. So if this is complete nonsense, that's why. But I believe that the RAF mechanic, where it for like the non-player faction, whatever it is actually a Butterfield staple that comes from it's in Freedom in the Galaxy. The Imperial player has to abide by the results of his like Imperial Resources card or whatever it's called. So what Ken's asking is, so Lee is trying to get this like coordinated attack off where he's hammering with his main pushes with Longstreet's corps, and he is also pressuring the Union elsewhere so that they can't rush reinforcements to that location. And it doesn't come off because the coordination does not happen because Longstreet is late on the attack. That is built into the mechanic in that when, say, Pickett's card comes up, you're going to roll to see to what extent Pickett activates. Does he activate the whole? I don't know if it's Pickett. It could be Longstreet, although I think it's Pickett. To what extent does he get to activate that formation? Does it all activate? In which case, great, everything goes off. Or does only part of it get to activate? Or does none of it get to activate? And they're standing there by themselves while the rest of the attack goes off. So that kind of command uncertainty at that scale is modeled pretty well by that system. I think I've seen it work in 3 Days to Gettysburg, although I think it's a little harder to explain in 3 Days of Gettysburg. There's what's called like, I forget, Stigler will tell us what it's called. There's like a combined activation where you can make a leadership role of some kind to activate in multiple formations at once. That is something that you can do in the great battles of the American Civil War system. And it's interesting that we have seen so many Chit-pull mechanics in American Civil War games. Specifically. Now, there's plenty of other examples too. I mean, I could think off the top of my head of Ancients games and World War II games and World War I, maybe not, that use a Chit-pull mechanism.
So, I mean, why did this Chit-pull focus on American Civil War?
Well, so one of the things that happens, and when you start looking at these American Civil War battles, is exactly the kind of thing that Ken is talking about, where somebody like Lee is trying to get this coordinated attack off, and it doesn't go off because Longstreet's attacking and it is late putting those forces together. So how do you model that command inefficiency? And there are ways to do it. One of the ways to do it is is Herman's way of doing it, which is you have a roll once you draw the chit or card. The way Great Battles does it is more with the overall efficiency of the formation, which determines how many chits for that formation will end up in the cup that turn. You have more than one, at least potentially. You could have up to 4 chits for the same formation in the cup at any given turn, and you can use all 4 of them if you want to. And there's reasons not to do that. There's like a fatigue rule. That's an optional rule that you should always play with.
So just Artie, just to throw ASL out on the table, there is absolutely no such thing as Chit-pull in ASL. Is that right?
No. ASL has one of the most rigid. I mean, it's not any more rigid, I suppose, than a lot of other games, but it's a very, very structured turn sequence. It is I go, you go, but it is also reasonably interactive in that most fire is defensive. That happens in ASL ends up being defensive fire rather than like the attacker firing. So, like on my turn, you're going to probably, in all likelihood, be firing more than I am. I'll be moving. You'll be firing.
Right.
You'll be firing at the moving units. So it's another way of addressing the criticism of a lot of I go, you go games of that they're boring because I'm not doing anything when you're going, right? And which is a completely reasonable criticism, actually.
So ASL cannot benefit from a Chit-pull mechanic.
I would say not. But that's just the way. I mean, that's just the way the game's designed, right? If somebody's talking about,
what about events? Are there any events in ASL?
There can be, and so they're either in ASL they're either triggered by special scenario rule, or which could be handled. You know, there's thousands of scenarios, so I can't tell you how it's handled. It depends on the scenario. Or it's handled by some kind of like corner case roll result on some other kind of roll. So if on a fire roll you roll the sniper number exactly, well, the sniper activates and maybe some lieutenant gets shot in the face or something like that. That is an example, but each of those events, there's not like a general event mechanism that says, okay, when there's an event, you draw a card and do what the card says. There's like a special rule for each of those different kinds of things, like hero creation, units that go berserk. The sniper is one example. We need to turn this off.
I said events twice. I think random events have to be there. Excuse me, have to be there. I was watching something on YouTube about, I don't know, an American squad just checking out. They're on the road and just checking out a village to see if I don't know, any ISIS guys are there or Taliban guys. Old video, I don't know. And so they're walking in formation, all far away from each other. All of a sudden, they're getting shot at, right? So they walk down, and there's a fence. It's got to be about this big, so their heads are sticking out. But what struck me was the bees buzzing around them in Afghanistan. I mean, if that doesn't disturb you when you're getting shot at, it would freak me. Well, look, I don't know. Maybe I would be a professional soldier, and that hornet the size of my landing on my head doesn't scare me because you got a big bad ISIS there. I think it's important events.
Well, so one of the reasons why ASL specifically has as many rules as it does is because it models every one of those weird little things as like its own rules, right?
Yeah,
some of those things have like a whole set rule section of, okay, now's when the paratroops land, right?
Yeah, but how can you model nature? How can you model weather? How can you know what I'm saying? In ASL.
Well, ASL there is wind, and the wind can change. So if you manage to set a building on fire, which is something that can happen, which there's a whole rule section on, the fire can spread depending on the wind intensity and direction. And the wind intensity and direction can change from turn.
No, I understand that. Well, what about playing in the Pacific Theater, World War II, when you're in the jungle and this bloody tiger or baboon comes at you? I mean, we're laughing.
Sure, I can't think of any actual baboon-related actions, but I mean, but weird stuff happens, right?
Hey,
Unpredictable
man.
stuff happens. In ASL does model unexpected things happening, right? But it more or less models them by having a Byzantine array of rules for everything, right? Where another game might handle that through chits or cards or something or something else, right? Or tables. Another Chit-pull game is the Ancient World series from Berg and GMT, and that's a series I like a lot. And it has special event mechanics as well as does the Great Battles of the American Civil War.
Hey,
that's just like a huge series of nested tables.
What's Brian Martin saying there? In ASL, the bees would be an SSR.
Special SSR, special scenario rule. That's like the special rule that's at the bottom of the card that you got to abide by when you're playing that scenario.
I'd love to see an event that is strange like that.
I've seen weird stuff happen. I don't know about bees, but I mean, I've seen weird stuff happen in ASL, where it's just the natural interaction of the mechanics, and it works. It ends up working, but boy, it's a lot to learn because you have to know all these weird rules for this stuff to really get the most out of it and be able to see that stuff. Because if you miss it, well, we missed it. I forgot to check for bees this turn, right?
Well, for bees, you're making fun of me, man.
Yeah, now I'm not actually. I'm not. I'm a little surprised that there's no rules for bees in ASL, actually.
Man, because I saw those guys in Afghanistan and those bees, man, I swear to God.
Those might have been the those death wasps or murder hornets or whatever we had here.
I am
this
telling
last
you,
year in 2020, because it's the kind of year we had.
I swear, man, they were getting shot at and these bees flying around. And I was like, holy cow! The bees!
Yeah. There's another game that has rules for commanders getting drunk, and I forget what it is. This is not an unfair analysis of ASL, actually.
Okay, well, hold on. You're talking about the Asake rule in one of the historical modules?
Yeah, I think there's like a whiskey and a sake chit that you have in CSS, but I think all they are is re-rolls. You can re-roll a roll.
Okay.
There's rules. I've seen rules for drunk commanders in some Civil War game that I've played. I forget what it was. Might even have been I don't think it was Line of Battle, actually, but these things happen, right? So
well, drunk commander, I mean, did this really happen? I'm sure it really happened, but
yeah, this might have been the one I'm talking about. There's a rule for this in Germantown. This is the Battles of the American Revolution series from GMT and designer. Somebody will mention the designer's name. I actually have the tri-packet, which is a wonderful package, but I haven't actually had a chance.
Miklos.
Mike Miklos, yeah.
Okay, hold on a second. The commander here, the drunk commander, I'm assuming he was caught off guard. It was an ambush or something, because he's not getting hammered, knowing he's going to go into war.
Well, presumably not, but I don't know what the specifics are. But I do remember hearing that one of the American commanders was in fact drunk at the Battle of Germantown, and there is a rule for that. I was looking at it as I was punching and clipping that game. There is a rule for that in the Germantown game.
So do they make allowances for, when you get drunk and you fall down the stairs, nothing happens to you?
Well, you don't remember that it happened. You just wake up sore the next day. That's how it works.
You get a cannonball hitting there right next to you and you go flying and you just wake up. You get up and it's like, what the hell just happened?
So I think there's certainly a lot of examples of Richard Berg games that do have a lot of random tables. I mean, but Richard Berg designed a lot of games too. And wasn't always concerned about making them as simple and clean as possible. And one of the ways you can add Chrome is to put random tables into a game system. He did that twice with Blackbeard, with the two different Blackbeard games, which really two different games that have the same title.
Is the second game really that crappy?
I owned and got rid of the second game. I have played and am still looking for the original from Avalon Hill, which I played back in the day and liked a lot. It's very simmy, but that's what I liked about it, right? You could play, it's a great solitaire game. You just kind of tool around the map, pirating, and random stuff happens. It's fun. So, I mean, you can be a drunk commander, playing a war game. That's very plausible.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because what I just said, you're not going to get hammered to go into war. Yeah, tell that to the Germans in World War II with Pervitin.
Oh, well, there was a whole book about that, actually, about the various drugs and amphetamines that they took. The Germans were not alone in doing that kind of stuff either.
No, I know. I mean, I would be all pumped up on I don't know what if I go into battle. I don't know what battle is. Are you kidding, man? You know what I'm saying?
I've never done battle.
I've never done battle.
Anyway, I forget which version of that movie that line was in, but it was a funny line.
I remember
Shanks Evans. I am not familiar with Evans. I mean, could pop up anywhere.
The guy's name was Shanks.
Shanks, a typical Confederate name. Actually, they had some interesting names after all.
The Zulus, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything. I've never even seen the movie. So
yeah, I bought some stuff off them once. It was pretty heavy.
So Toil here is saying that the chits can represent different things. That's true.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of an example of that.
Man, you can use a Chit-pull for.
That's absolutely true. You can do that, or you can. I mean, you can use it to provide your random events mechanic as well, and you could just throw the random event chits right in the cup, right? Where you're using the random events in Great Battles, the American Civil War, you actually do have a random event chit that goes in the cup. But it's just one chit, right? And then when you draw the chit, you roll on the table.
Right.
Whereas in GTS, you don't have a chit for the random events. You have a separate cup of random event chits. And then when you roll that 9 for whatever kind of roll it is, then you pull out the random
It's
chit.
not in the sequence of play. Like you do it every turn, random events. And okay, good.
Well, so in the sequence of play in that game system is basically determine what the weather is and then action phase. And then that's the sequence of play.
Right.
So, I mean, some games don't have a strongly structured sequence of play. GTS is one of them. It's a very straightforward, do this tiny little housekeeping at the beginning of the turn and tiny little housekeeping at the end of the turn, and then the whole rest of the turn is just you're drawing chit after chit after chit until the cup's empty.
Is it interesting that?
I had a tremendous fun time playing GTS personally.
But hold on, if it's and I was thinking about something. If it's Chit-pull that much, then it's basically roll a die, check a chart.
Well, yeah, but you don't have to.
It's B7 between the skies.
Well, I mean, it's not that you're not making decisions, though, right? That's just giving you telling you whose commands are happening right now. So again, GTS, you're going to draw either a divisional or a formation, which in the case of most GTS games, that formation will be a regiment or brigade. So you're either going to activate the whole division, and then you can move every unit in the division and do stuff with them, or you're going to activate one of the sub-formations of the division, which will be either a regiment or a brigade. And the two types of chits are different. For the divisional activation, basically for everything that you want to activate, you have to spend points on to activate. You have like a points pool. But for the formation activation, you don't. I'm not saying that correctly. You basically, when you activate a specific unit, you get 2 actions, and the types of actions that are allowable are different between the division chit and the formation chit. The formation chit lets you attack more easily. So when you're trying to get that attack going, you really want to have the formation chits in the pool. That's the chit that you want to come up. So there's like a lot going on in the turn, but it's not that the turn sequence is highly structured or that you're not making decisions or anything like that. There's just one big action phase rather than having a bunch of little sub phases where you move and you shoot and you recover or whatever.
And it sounds very soloable, what you're talking about, man.
It's considered most Chit-pull. That's actually an interesting point.
Yeah.
Most Chit-pull games, because they're like the flow of the game is less predictable, are considered more suitable for solitaire play than average.
So you know what? Yeah, okay. So B17, there's charts and all that, and it's very rigid. You don't have a choice into what you're gonna do or where the bullet hit or whatever. But and what would be a small Great Battles of American Civil War from MMP that I could get into, which is what you're talking about right now?
GMT. The best current package available from them is Death Valley. It is a big 3-inch box. It's a huge package, but there's like don't quote me actual number, but there's like 10 different battles in it or something like that. So a couple of which are fairly big, but a bunch of which are quite small. So that's one of the, and it's not an easy system particularly, but it's a great package because of that, because it lets you ramp up to, this big battle at second or I think third Winchester is the big one. Or is it first Winchester? Stigler will correct me on that. One of the Winchesters is the big battle in there, but a lot of the rest of them, like Cross Keys and Port Republic and stuff like that, those are pretty small battles. So you don't have tons and tons and tons of stuff to move around, but it's all the same Chit-pull mechanism. So you got to ask Gilbert Collins that, because he's got a whole channel that
don't mess with Gilbert Collins.
So much Civil War goodness on that channel, actually.
All right, Bayonet Brandt.
Brandt hates American Civil War games, so.
And he's American, the guy.
That's Brandt is, yeah.
Yeah.
So Twin Peaks is the name of the game. I don't know that Twin Peaks is still available. It might be, in which case it's a great buy, because it's two, I'd say, mid-sized battles in comparison to like the smaller battles from Death Valley.
It's funny, eh? I don't know who it was. Who was it that said Arcane? Oh, Brandt. Brandt's not into the American Civil War. What got me into
which is hilarious because he lives in North Carolina.
See,
which is in the South, which has a reputation for generally being obsessed with the American Civil War.
And the thing is that I really want to learn about the American Civil War, and what got me into getting into games about the American Civil War was Rick Barber maps. I saw that and I said, oh my God, how can you not get immersed? How can you not get immersed in a game that has a map like that? And that's what started it.
I was historically not an American Civil War player, and I've told this story many times at this point. I was not a American Civil War player. I had owned a few, including some great campaigns games and some various other stuff over the years, and never played anything like until like 2018 or probably 2016 actually. And then I played For the People, and it was all over at that point. I got super into Civil War, and now own. I have more World War II games, but it's American Civil War is like my number 2 category, and I have more American Civil War books than World War II books. I can tell you that.
Hey, look, man, American Civil War changed the world, just like World War II changed the world, man.
Yeah. Plus, it's here, right? I could drive 5 hours and visit a big Civil War battlefield, and the documentation on it is in English, which is helpful, right? So I don't have to like rely on like French sources for Napoleonic books and stuff like that, which is a thing. It's there's a lot on the Napoleonic period that you can't access unless you read French. So and probably German and Russian too, but French. So that's a potential issue. American Civil War, we don't have that problem. Plus, it's a period that has many colorful characters in it. some of whom have become colorful through embellished folklore, like Ulysses S. Grant, drunk all the time, which is complete nonsense. There is not a shred of evidence that he was drunk all the time, or even once while he was actually actively commanding stuff.
Or was McClellan that much of an idiot? Impossible.
Well, it's a good example. The young Napoleon, they called him, and he had the cojones to run for president against Abraham Lincoln in 1864 too. So that took some gumption right there.
Well, in hindsight, we could say that.
McClellan was, to a certain extent. Now we're drifting now.
Yeah.
McClellan was incompetent, but gets a bit of a bad reputation because he was getting a lot of bad intel from what was then the Union Army's intelligence service, which was the Pinkerton Detective Agency. They were very reliant. McClellan specifically was very reliant on the intel they were feeding him, and they consistently gave him information that said he was vastly outnumbered in the face of Robert E. Lee's enormous Confederate army that never actually existed. So in that context, had he in fact been vastly outnumbered 3-1 all the time, then a lot of his conservative moves don't look so stupid. But I mean, he absolutely could have done more to strike to have a greater Union victory in the field at Antietam, for example. And a lot of games that model that have to model McClellan's reluctance to commit his reserves because he's afraid there's this giant Confederate army right around the corner. Well, he was also, Doug mentions, this is absolutely true. He was a very good organizer. He built the Army of the Potomac and turned it into a good fighting force, and then was not the guy to lead it at the end of the day when the time came to actually fight the battles. But he was very good at organizing.
Now, hold on, Doug, is this a play on words, but he took counsel of his fears?
I think Doug's trying to say that he was afraid that he was going to get outmaneuvered. So the classic, remember that a lot of these American Civil War generals were admirers of Napoleon. And the classic Napoleonic maneuver is the maneuver sur la derrière, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a back around and rout the enemy from in the butt. Yeah. So McClellan was always afraid of that happening, and Robert E. Lee was like a member of the Napoleon Admiration Society or something like that at West Point. So they were always trying to pull these maneuvers off, it never actually happened. The closest thing to Napoleon once or twice actually destroyed an opposing army using these types of tactics. Even Napoleon couldn't pull it off that often, and it was never accomplished in the American Civil War. The closest I can think of where we're talking about an entire army is probably Chickamauga, where a huge chunk of the Union Army, basically, including Rosecrans, the commander, routs and flees back to it's not Murfreesboro. It's and it's not Nashville either. But they basically flee, and it's only George Thomas, the Rock of Chickamauga, that holds off the attacking Confederates, that allows the Union Army to pull back and actually regroup.
Jesus, it sounds like a movie, man.
Yeah, Chickamauga is a fascinating battle, actually.
And hold on a second. And in between them routing and coming in their behind, how much time passed?
Oh, this is all happens in the span of a day or so. Rosecrans was never the same after this. He was his confidence had been shattered by this. And it was exactly the same type of situation that we were talking about with Lee and Longstreet earlier, where some orders came through. They were garbled. It left a big gap because the orders weren't understood properly. They left a big gap on the Union line. And Longstreet, who wasn't even supposed to be there, had been sent west, basically took advantage of that and routes basically the entire Union Army. And only George Thomas holds it off. George Thomas, a son of Virginia, who remained loyal to his oath to the Union, I will also point out, was disowned by his family for doing so. So I agree with Hethwill here. I think there's many fascinating battles in the west of the American Civil War that don't get nearly as much traction as the big battles in the east, because all the big name, not all, but a lot of the big name battles, like your Gettysburg, your Antietam, your Fredericksburg, and Chancellorsville, those are all out east. Out west, Chickamauga and Shiloh. But there's also a lot of other interesting battles, and some of which are very hard to simulate, right? There's been very few games on the Siege of Vicksburg, for example, which was happened right at the same time as Gettysburg, and which was very decisive in the course of the entire war.
Artie, I know we're getting off the subject here. What's a definitive Civil War movie?
Maybe Gettysburg is not the best movie, but it's a lot of fun to watch, I think.
Okay.
And it's it's a little slanted too, but that's the source material.
Slanted on the Union side, right?
Toward the Confederacy. That's because of who made the movie and the book that the movie was based on.
Oh no! You know what? I find that cool. That's one way of looking at it, and that's one thing I wanted to discuss with Riccardo Mazzini. Is
now, on the other hand, there's a great scene in C. Thomas Howell plays like the one of the Union. He's like a captain or something like that. And at one point, there's like they're like running some captured rebels in, and the C. Thomas Howell's like, so tell me, you boys, what are you boys fighting for? And the Southern guys are like, we're fighting for our rights. And the C. Thomas Howell is baffled by that. He's like, for your rights? What rights? What rights are you fighting for exactly? So I mean, it's not like there's a. I don't want to overstate the point of I think it's a biased film, because I think it's forgivable in the context of the movie.
It's fine.
Unlike Gods and Generals, which is simply garbage. It's a terrible movie.
I want to know how a Southerner feels about a certain battle as opposed to the same battle as a Union. A Yankee, you know what I mean?
Well, they have different names for a lot of the battles, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yes.
And it's interesting in some cases. I feel like the battle's better known by its Union name, and in some cases, I think it's better known by its Confederate name.
Kenneth, thanks a lot, man. But I have a hard time reading. I'm going to need it audio. So if I can get something in audio, I would love that.
You may be able to get some. Check out Stephen W. Sears.
Now hold on.
Like the department store. Some of his stuff is available in audio form.
I don't want the whole Civil War because
he does campaign stuff. So you want Gettysburg or Antietam or Chickamauga or whatever.
Fantastic. I think I'm gonna watch Gettysburg tonight, man.
So there's things to Gods and Generals is not 100% bad, but the movie is bad. It's a bad movie. The Robert Duvall as Lee is good casting. That's very good casting.
So no, not that movie.
What's his name? Gods and Generals. Don't watch that. That's like the sequel. It's not really a sequel. It's got some of the same cast as Gettysburg, but not everybody. The interesting thing is that the guy they have, I can never remember this dude's name. He's a bad guy from Avatar. It plays George Pickett in Gettysburg. But plays Stonewall Jackson in Gods and Generals. And he's a good choice for Stonewall Jackson, actually.
Yeah, man. I love to see these historical figures come alive, man.
Glory is also a good movie. By the way, that's the movie with Matthew
Broderick.
The unwatchable Matthew Broderick, but it's also got a bunch of good actors in it.
I have a story with Matthew Broderick.
Oh, did you punch him in the face?
Almost.
Oh, okay.
But I used to work at the YMCA, so he came down. They were shooting a movie in Montreal, and he was
with the village people.
So I was working at the YMCA, and he came down with the whole cast, Cassavetes and everything. And I said, "Hey, Matthew, I'm going to kick your ass in squash. You want to play squash?" He says he doesn't play squash. He plays racquetball. And I'm like, "I don't play racquetball, but what the hell? I'll kick your ass anyways." He beat the crap out of me so bad it wasn't even funny.
Well, I mean, he's a fit young man, so
yeah, I was fit too.
Skinny, by which I mean skinny.
I was solid.
So I'm trying to think. There's another one called The Field of Lost Shoes, which I haven't heard about. That actually is about one. It's about some, like, I think Virginia Military Institute cadets that get rushed into battle because there's nobody else at the time. And one of the battle in question is one of the battles out of Death Valley. So that might be worth looking into as well. But I haven't seen the movie, so it might not be that good. Lincoln is good, but it's not what I'd call a Civil War movie. It's very tightly focused. This is the one with Daniel Day-Lewis as Lincoln. It's very tightly focused on Lincoln himself in this narrow window of time. He must be
spectacular doing Lincoln.
He is very good as Lincoln. Yeah, it's really, I think it's an overrated movie, except for his performance, which is brilliant. Jared Harris plays U.S. Grant in that film, by the way, who is also brilliant and good in everything he's in.
Matt Taylor says here, Glory is the best American Civil War movie, but I thought Glory was about a black regiment.
It is, but I think it's the regiment that ends up getting obliterated in the Battle of the Crater. I think that's the battle in question at the end, where some bad advice led to frontal assaults.
Now, is this a movie? Is this a legit movie, or they just
Glory?
Yeah,
no, it's a very good movie.
It's a legit movie. Okay.
Despite Matthew Broderick's presence in it, it is a very good movie. It is totally worth your time. There's a lot of there's that sappy, romancy movie that was Jude Law and Nicole Kidman were in. I can't remember the name of that because I didn't see it. There's that thing with Matthew McConaughey from a couple of years ago, Free State of Jones, which I kind of wanted to see, but I didn't see it.
Oh yeah. Again, doesn't he take on black soldiers and bring them with him somewhere or something like that?
Yeah. So it's basically Union loyalist partisan enclave in the South, which was something that happened more than people want to recall, by the way. Like East Tennessee was staunchly pro-Union, for example. Now it wasn't just West Virginia. So I'm being corrected on Cold Mountain is the one with Jude Law and Nicole Kidman. Okay. Like I said, I haven't seen that.
So what do I do? Gettysburg, or do I do
Gettysburg and Glory should get you started. Gettysburg's like a 4-hour movie. There's an extended cut that's available to buy digitally from Amazon. I would watch the extended cut.
Yes, of course. Can I just rent it extended?
I'm not, maybe, but it's cheap to buy, so I would just buy it.
Why?
I actually bought it through Amazon. It's one of I don't buy movies digitally normally, but The Horse Soldiers. So there is a movie. Is it How the West Was Won that stars John Wayne as I forget. John Wayne as Sherman, I think, something like that. Was it How the West Was Won? Atrocious casting, atrocious. And I think Harry Morgan is U.S. Grant or something like that. Crazy casting.
I'd love to see a major movie done of the American Civil War, but like Lord of the Rings type thing. You know what I mean, man? Detailed, and I want to know what's going on. And
so, I mean, we didn't quite. Gettysburg is the closest thing we have to that, and it isn't quite there, So Gettysburg, because it has to, right? I mean, you only got like 4 hours to show. I mean, you can't get everything in. So it leaves out a lot of stuff that happens at Gettysburg and chooses instead to focus on specific things. It focuses on Buford on the first day, on Pickett on the second day, and then on Chamberlain at Little Round Top.
And you gotta omit. You have to omit.
And it does well, right. There's a lot. It's a huge battle, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of pieces. Like Devil's Den, never mentioned. Devil Dan Sickles, never mentioned. A bunch of the guys playing Meade and Reynolds they're nobodies.
Yeah,
and they have nobody screen time.
They're major players. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Reynolds gets shot pretty early on the first day, so Reynolds' notable contribution to Gettysburg is getting killed. But he's a super important guy and would have been, an interesting piece to highlight had they, and like stuff like the Iron Brigade gets mentioned, and that's basically it. So,
see, Matt Taylor says Ken Burns Civil War. I must have seen that about 10 times, and I'm gonna see it again. And the spot that I always stop is the Gettysburg Address by Lincoln. It blows my mind. Anyways,
Ken Burns Civil War gives way too much time to Shelby Foote, is its problem, and it results in an unbalanced narrative because of it. And the reason why that is not bias on the part of Ken Burns. It's because Shelby Foote was super charming, so they gave him tons of screen time.
Super charming,
yeah.
Man.
So that's why, but it is really Shelby Foote's Civil War more than Ken Burns' Civil War.
Yes,
when you're actually watching it, and that's a problem because you're only getting that. They tried to balance it out with other perspectives, but that's what landed, right?
Artie, it's a problem. It's going to be a problem. Whoever writes history, it's going to be a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, actual historians will make an effort, or at least are supposed to make an effort to balance their sources out and take that kind of stuff into the account. Findle 70 mentions The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is actually set during the Civil War. He's absolutely right.
That's right.
Yeah, you can't realistically call it a Civil War movie, but it's a great movie, and it's if you haven't seen, anybody watch it hadn't seen that, please go see that immediately. It's a great movie.
Awesome.
So this is absolutely true. Stephen Reynolds points out that glory is from the soldier's perspective rather than the general's perspective, which is something that, say, Gettysburg kind of goes back and forth on. But it's much more of a leadership perspective, which is kind of a classic thing to do in Civil War. Talking about the Civil War is you focus on the leaders a lot rather than on the individual soldiers. That's something that you don't see as often with World War II, for example. This is one of those things that I know the story that Reynolds said no, and I find it believable that he said no, but I have not seen the actual documentation of that. And there's a lot of these kinds of stories, like Robert E. Lee was offered command of the Army, the Union Army, and there's not a shred of evidence to prove that. So.
Oh, that's right. There's that story where he turned it down because his hometown was in the South.
Well, at the time, that supposedly it's in God. The scene's in Gods and Generals, and they make sure the guy making the offer is this real oily, sleazy type too. So, this is a great advice here. For the People is a wonderful game. Actually, it's what got me started. Like I said, what got me started on American Civil War stuff. Is
it stupid friendly?
No. So it's a Mark Herman card driven game. It is a quite a high brain power game. Let me put it that way. I'm not saying it's you can't learn it. I'm saying it is reasonably complicated.
It's involved.
And it's one of those things where I don't think it's more complicated than say Paths of Glory. It's not super complicated. But there's a lot going on, and to play it competently takes more than the trivial effort. So,
well, Artie, we got a minute and a half, man.
We have a minute and a half.
Yeah,
so
I'm enjoying these Wednesday night at the pub.
Oh yeah, too. Except without the booze. So I went to the liquor store today at the local grocery store. I've talked many times about how terrible it is buying liquor in Ohio, and it was like they had like nothing. They had nothing I would drink.
I don't even know her.
They had all they had was the stuff you just swill down to drown your sorrows and misery. Yeah, exactly. And I don't do that. I don't do that anymore.
No way.
So anyway.
Hey, you know what? How familiar are you with ancients, Artie? Are you?
What are we talking about? Ancients is like 5,000 years of history, right? So,
well, no, I'm talking about GMT Ancient Games.
I'm a huge fan of the Great Battles of History series, which is mostly ancient. Not all, but mostly ancients.
I'd like to talk about that. I know we said that.
Okay.
I because you know stuff there, and I got some games like that, and they look intimidating, but
we can talk about that. There's plenty of good options. at all difficulty scales in the sphere of Ancients. And we can talk about Ancients next week at your place.
My house.
So Ancients next week. And I would like to thank 56 folks watching right now. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. Oh, look, I see the thing where StreamYard tells me how many people there are. That's cool. Oh, that's cool too. I'm just exploring the menu here.
Oh, you just found out? Okay.
Well, it's like in the screen. It's at the little ticker up top.
Yeah,
it's not like anywhere logical. So I'm gonna negate the grumbling Grognard's recommendation on that about the blue and gray quad. I think there's better options nowadays. I think you're better off playing Battlecry, to be honest. It's got about as much, blue and gray's got about as much simulation value as Battlecry. Which is not to say it's not fun to play. They're still fine, but there's nothing noteworthy there that makes it worth tracking down, I don't think.
Longstreet, eh?
I'm not sure which Longstreet game he means. I'm thinking of Longstreet Attacks, which is one of Herman's games, which is the second day at Gettysburg, which is it's kind of big, actually. So I think it's 2 maps and it's like 2 or 3 counter sheets. It's a fairly big game. It's not complicated. That's an easy system to play. Very approachable. But and I recommend it. So then another one is from the game is called The Devils to Pay. It's the first day of Gettysburg. That's a small one. So if you want like a small introductory entry-level game that happens to have maps by the late great Rick Barber,
I know.
Grab The Devils to Pay now, because probably in 2 years it's going to be going for about $1.6 million.
I'm so sad. I'm so sad that Rick Barber passed. Yeah.
Irreplaceable artist. Because there's no other artist in. So I'm going to eulogize Rick for about 2 minutes here because I don't want to run too long. But there's no other artist in wargaming that has with the possible exception of Dean Essig, that has a style that is so instantly recognizable that if you see it, you know that Rick did this map. And in a bewildering array of periods that run from Ancients to Modern to World War II to Civil War. He's best known for Civil War stuff, but he's done stuff everywhere. He's done he did air games. What is that? There you go, Longstreet Attacks.
Yeah.
So you don't have to run that down. Play that. That's a great game.
I just love this map, man.
So it's a beautiful map. And to be honest about it, I went and looked at some of Rick's older Gettysburg maps, including like the map for Summer Storm, and I really think that the Most Fearful Sacrifice map is nicer.
Seriously,
it's clearer. It's nicer. I mean, part of that is probably that it's blown way up, which certainly helps. It's an amazing map. So I am unaware of any RPG contributions that Rick may have made, but I'm not telling you no.
Anyways, gentlemen.
All right, everybody, we got to go. I would like to thank everybody for stopping by, and don't forget to join us next week. Dan, do you have any broadcasts you'd like to mention before we go that are coming up to your channel? Like Saturday?
No, I know Saturday, no, but I know that I'm interviewing 4 Canadian designers for the San Diego Historicon on the 20th of May.
Yeah, May, whatever that is, 19th through the 20th or something like that, 18th, something like that. I don't have the dates in front of me now. So Dan and I are both participating in that. If you haven't checked that out, please do check it out. The San Diego Historical Games Convention. If you Google San Diego Historical Games Convention, you'll find it. So again, thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you.